When you arrive in the afterlife, God is nowhere to be seen. You ask a passing angel where he is. I believe he is a room somewhere reading a book by Helen Musk. He reads this book a lot, comes the answer. Right. Who is Helen Musk? You query. She was a biological robotics engineer from Silicon Valley on Earth. Apparently, she was the richest person on Earth, and she sits on a special throne here and is cared for and protected by a coven of angels. God clutches her book to his chest and sits up all night reading How to Create an Intelligent Robot That is Self-Aware. Like Helen Musk, God considers himself a medical doctor, a biological engineer without parallel, and he has a deep and painful relationship with any story written about the creation of life. God has much to say about bringing animation to the unanimated. Very few of his creatures had thought deeply about the challenges of creation, and it relieved him of the loneliness of his position when Helen wrote her guidebook of instructions. The first time God read Helen Musk's book, he criticized it the whole way through for its oversimplification of the processes involved. But when he reached the end, he was won over. For the first time, someone understood him. That is when he called for her and put her on a throne. To appreciate his outpouring of feeling, you must understand the direction of God's medical career. God discovered the principles of self-organization by initially experimenting with yeast and bacteria, and he reveled in the beauty of his inventions. Once he mastered the general principles, his inventions became increasingly sophisticated. With artistic flair, he stitched together a big dinosaur-type thing and also a compact beetle. And he also put together giant pods of glistening dolphins. His skills became razor sharp, and he keenly fashioned with blinding accuracy all the animals at the limits of his vast imagination. God designed all his creatures, and then unwittingly he crossed his Rubicon. He created a human. Man was his most prized possession, something to treasure, a showpiece and an obsession. Unlike all the other animals who experienced each day like the one before, man cared, sought, yearned, erred, coveted, and ached, just like God himself. He marveled as man picked through the ground and formed tools. The invention of musical instruments reached God's ears like a symphony. In fascination, God watched men gather together and erect cities, but then he felt apprehension as humans began to argue and fight with each other. And it didn't take long before invasions began. War after war waged as the day followed the night. God tried to talk to those who might listen, but he quickly discovered that he had less control than he thought. There were simply too many of them. He tried to make good things come to good people and bad to bad, but he was no Helen Musk. He simply did not have the technology to implement his wishes. The bloodshed mounted and was carried forward by Assyrians, Babylonians, Romans, and the New World Order. East and West flung themselves at each other. The bright and beautiful land was darkening with human blood, and there was precious little he could do to stop it. All throughout the carnage, God could hear the voices of humankind reaching him and pleading for help. God plugged his ears and howled. He tried to block out the prayers of the suffering masses. And now God locks himself in his room. At night, when it is safe, he sneaks out onto the roof with a copy of Helen Musk's book, and he reads it again and again. He consoles himself with the thought that all creation necessarily ends this way, creators powerless and fleeing from the things they have wrought.